start an investigation into the Bidens. Because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
Good morning, Mexico. I'm María Salazar. Welcome to ADN 40 News. This is Saturday, October 5th. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Agustín Barrios Gómez. Welcome, everyone. We're here live from our studios in Mexico City. We're also on Twitter at AM Salazar in the case of Ana María, at Agustín Barrios G. In my case, lots of news this week. We're going to be...
What a week. And that's what this show is all about. It's right. 1 hour of news, information, analysis of many of the events that took place this week, not only in Mexico, but we do have to go look up north and see what's going on.
That's right. And of course, as everyone knows, from 8 to 9, we're here transmitting in English, and then from 9 to 10 in Español.
In Español. Let's start.
Bien.
Let's go.
Let's start with this local news. On Friday afternoon, hundreds of federal police protested by closing 2 main roads. The first blockade occurred in Periférico Sur, in front of the Torre Pedregal. That's the offices of the federal police. It was brief, and then protesters closed for more than 6 hours Circuito Interior, the freeway that leads to Mexico City's International Airport, one of the two, the other being Viaducto. Even though they did not reach an agreement, dissidents had no choice but to reopen that freeway.
But the demonstrations did not only affect motorists, those who were trying to reach the airport, but also dozens of travelers trying to catch their flights. Some ran with their suitcases, others were transported by police cars to get to the terminals, so they didn't have to walk for quite a while. And at least in terms of what is being reported right now, Agustín, apparently there was an agreement reached.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will not be happening again.
Right. And Jesus Horta resigned as head of Mexico City's Ministry of Public Safety. He was replaced by Omar Garcia Harfuch, described by Horta as a man with enough police experience to bring back peace to the city. This and more is part of our political summary. Let's take a look.
Congress hearings concerning the first governmental report continued this week. Before senators, Health Secretary Jorge Alcocer acknowledged that there is a low percentage of medicine shortages, although he reaffirmed that neither austerity measures or corruption will obstruct any medical attention for the population. Alcocer added that around 70 billion pesos will be used for health services around the country. And Secretary of Finance Arturo Herrera was also present at the hearings. He reminded us that a stagnation in economic growth may provoke a recession, which means that countries like Chile could be 3 or 4 times economically stronger than Mexico.
Si nosotros hubiéramos tenido las tasas de crecimiento del PIB de Chile, en lugar de que nuestro producto se estuviera duplicando cada 29 años, se estaría duplicando cada 14 años. Y las consecuencias en bienestar para las familias y las diferentes de esas regiones son diametralmente diferentes. Que el ingreso promedio de los habitantes de México se está duplicando a estas tasas cada 87 años, mientras que el de Chile lo hace solo cada 19 años.
Secretary of Education Esteban Moctezuma also appeared before legislators. He denied that during discussions on the educational reform, union groups obtained privileges about the positions. Moctezuma added that the state runs that situation.
El presidente López Obrador ha sido muy claro al ordenarnos eliminar la venta de plazas y el abuso en su asignación que todavía existen. Queremos eliminar la corrupción en el sistema educativo nacional. Vamos a terminar con lo que llamamos el huachicol educativo. Ni corrupción arriba, ni corrupción abajo. Los beneficiarios, sin duda, serán los niños y los maestros.
And by consensus, the Superior Chamber of the Electoral Tribunal of Justice validated Jaime Bonilla as governor of Baja California for 2 years. Magistrates evaluated the vote tabulation, the validity declaration, and the majority of votes. And the Eduardo Medina Mora resigned as Minister of the Supreme Court of Justice, an unprecedented event in the history of the judicial body, restructured by an amendment to the judiciary back in 1994. His resignation was accepted by the president, but the Senate's approval is still pending. ADN 40 News.
And on the 51st anniversary of the Students' March of October 2nd, the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, said that the use of force was left behind, would no longer be used by this government. He also announced an opportunity for small farmers. This and more on as we're part of Andrés Manuel López Obrador's agenda for this week.
President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced a program for warranty prices that will operate for the Secretary of Agriculture. Its goal is to support small farmers and agricultural producers with fair prices for their crops in corn, beans, wheat, and rice, as well as milk.
Pues este es un anuncio, una noticia importante, buena para los productores. Lo podría yo sintetizar, resumir en una frase: que coman los que nos dan de comer. Eso es lo que podríamos decir, no abandonar a los campesinos.
While inaugurating the Latin American and Caribbean Regional Conference on Social Development, the president recalled that the base of his administration is to end corruption and impunity, as well as to govern with austerity.
Y todo lo que se libera para el desarrollo de nuestro pueblo, atendiendo a todos, escuchando a todos, respetando a todos, pero dándole preferencia a los humildes.
On the 51st anniversary of the Students' March of October 2nd, Andrés Manuel announced that the use of force has been left behind for good. We will run the country without violence, with the utmost respect of human rights, and guaranteeing liberties.
Nunca más una represión en México, nunca más torturas, desapariciones, masacres. Nunca más un 68.
10 months after his inauguration, and 6 after he promised to reduce the violence in the country, the president will debrief the nation on the status of public security. He assured there will be total transparency.
Pensamos que vamos bien. Hay gobernabilidad, hay tranquilidad, hay paz, la gente está contenta. Está funcionando la economía, hay bienestar.
ADN 40 News.
And the streets of Hong Kong became the stage of new massive protests against an emergency law that bans wearing masks at protests. This and more is part of our global weekly summary. Let's take a look.
A member of staff at the police headquarters in Paris went on a knife rampage on Thursday, killing 3 police officials and an administrative worker, before being shot dead by an officer. French officials say the assailant was a 45-year-old IT assistant who worked at the headquarters. There was no official word on the motive for the attack, which took place in the heart of the French capital near the Notre Dame Cathedral. But sources close to the police were quoted by French media as saying that the attacker had a grievance with his managers. A police spokesman said he had no comment on the incident.
Shortly before 10 a.m. Eastern Time Wednesday, a World War II vintage airplane crashed at Bradley International Airport near Hartford, Connecticut, killing an undetermined number of people and injuring many others. There was a plume of thick black smoke seen billowing skywards after the crash. The crash caused the airport to close for several hours.
Britain's latest proposals on Brexit have been met with cautious scepticism in the EU, with officials doubtful Prime Minister Boris Johnson's plan could yield an agreement by the end of October, but also keen not to dismiss them out of hand and risk being blamed if the EU crashes out of the bloc.
We have made a genuine attempt to bridge the chasm, to reconcile the apparently irreconcilable, and to go the extra mile as time runs short.
Johnson unveiled his proposals on Wednesday, which would include creating an all-Ireland regulatory zone, covering the whole island of Ireland, whilst also keeping Northern Ireland part of the UK customs territory, not the EU customs union. Ensuring that there is no physical infrastructure or border checks is seen as a key part of any deal. That's to avoid endangering the Good Friday Agreement that ended 3 decades of conflict in Northern Ireland. Varadkar said Johnson's assurances on Thursday that he was not proposing any new physical infrastructure were in contradiction with the papers he issued on Wednesday.
At San Giovanni metro station in Rome, passengers are queuing up at recycling machines instead of ticket machines, ready to deposit plastic bottles in exchange for train tickets. The new eco-friendly initiative rewards travellers in the Italian capital with 5 cents of credit for every plastic bottle fed into the compactor. That means you'll have to recycle 30 bottles to afford one standard ticket costing €1.50. Rome has suffered with rubbish problems for decades. Trash cans are often seen overflowing, and residents and tourists are affected by the foul stench of uncollected garbage, often seen piled up in front of ancient monuments. Trash for Tickets recycling machines will be placed in 3 metro stations for a 12-month testing phase.
And a trade war between the U.S. and China is affecting the American manufacturing industry. How does it do that? Well, business owners have been forced to reduce spending and review their supply chains. In September, the Manufacturing Activity Index shrank for the 2nd consecutive month.
And to talk about this, not only the trade war between the United States and China, but also how this could potentially affect Mexico and the rest of the world. Joining us today is Gonzalo Soto. He's the editor of Bloomberg Business Week Mexico. Thank you so much for joining us. That was one of the one of the stories that was published in this week's Bloomberg Business Week. Gonzalo. It's pretty good. Look, I mean, well, this is another.
So the question is, can we confide in in medicine that we can buy?
Generics. Well, that's another issue. That's another story.
Can we confide in the markets?
Short answer, not really. But that's another, as we said, that's another story. One of the, actually there are a couple of good stories in our most recent issue of Bloomberg Business Week Mexico, in which we deal with the current trade war. And what we're seeing is not only that the business are being affected, but they're also being affected in key states for Donald Trump's re-election. Right. So the economy has actually terrible news for Donald Trump if he wants to get re-elected, besides everything,
but besides the impeachment process and beside everything else.
Besides that, the economy is showing signs of slowing down, of affecting directly people who actually voted for him.
From the states.
Give us some examples of the states that are being affected.
For example, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana. Those are states that the trade war have been affected, have affected directly those voters. And moreover than that, our other story is that besides the economic affection, we have a security affection now. Why? I know it's a very, very common phrase and a very common place where they say, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And that's what China and the United States have been doing for the past few decades in terms of military engagement. That they were talking to each other. There was a conversation about, what are you doing, their military practices, trying to keep security, global security, at least in some sort of impasse or in peace, at least. Now that's gone. I mean, they've reached new levels in which they're not.
And this is because of the trade war.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not, but that's not a big deal. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys only have a few thousand nuclear weapons to destroy the world, so that's
no problem.
Well,
what's the issue there?
But there's also an added factor. We're going to be talking about the impeachment process. Since Donald Trump came out this week and publicly said, I did nothing wrong with Ukraine, asking the Ukraine.
It was a perfect conversation.
It was a perfect to help me and provide me information about Biden. He turned around and publicly told, and China, if you have information about Biden, please send it to me. And he publicly said it as a joke. But what we're interpreting it, a lot of analysts are interpreting, is that basically now China has another way of pressuring or negotiating with Donald Trump, or at least providing him information that he wants.
But they won't.
On his political rival.
I mean,
but the thing is, A few months ago, maybe. Right now, there are actually no back channels or true back channels in which that kind of information can actually flow and help Donald Trump.
I'm seriously, it doesn't matter. I mean, if they could go and sit down the table, I have information about Biden that you may like. Why don't you just help us with this part of it's a leverage point.
It's a leverage point. One of many. So, quick question, Gonzalo. So, sure. Coming back to Mexico, Nuevo Laredo became the most important port in the hemisphere. It was already the most important inland port. Now it actually beat Long Beach, Los Angeles as of May, if I remember correctly.
That is correct. That is correct.
That means that Mexico is actually benefiting from this from this Chinese trade war, right? And I think you have some graphics that have to do with the situation in terms of this is foreign direct investment, correct?
Correct. Out of the fallout that we've seen from the trade war between China and Mexico, we've seen that China and the United States, Mexico has actually taken advantage of it. Mm-hmm. Another country that has actually done pretty well is Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And Thailand. They both have acquired some of the business that China has stopped
in terms of manufacturing.
In terms of manufacturing. Mm-hmm. The thing is, do we really want that many manufacturing jobs without actually adding added value to those works? I mean, that's the issue right now.
And what are we seeing here on the chart?
Okay, what we're seeing here is the trade investments in both ways between the United States and China. The lighter bar you can see is the Chinese investment in the United States, and you can see in 2016 it reached it was almost 40% out of the whole investment from both countries. So it was pretty much it was a big investment. Now it's less than 5%. So
on both sides. So investment in the United States and China has plummeted, and investment in China in the United States has plummeted.
Correct. But investment in the United States and China has remained pretty much stable.
There it is.
I mean, businesses over there are trying to continue doing business as usual, although the political situation is not actually like that. Mm-hmm. And you can see here the change in goods.
This is imports from China. The red line is imports from China. Correct. The black line is exports to China.
That is correct.
So we've seen a decline in imports from China, significant decline. Right. That's like Definitely. What, 15%, 18%?
Almost 17%.
Okay.
Wow.
And then the black line, exports to China, actually maintain. But of course, you have to understand that there's that there is much less being exported from the United States to China than there is from
the
from
imports
China to
and the Chinese imports to the United States affect once again a lot of states that voted for Donald Trump. We're talking about agricultural machinery. We're talking about iPhones and whatever. But most of the bulk of that of those goods that would have been imported to the United States relate to the agricultural sector and the manufacturing sector. So those supply chains are being disrupted heavily right now, and they're affecting really, really bad.
And they're affecting states that voted for Donald Trump. And he won by a very small margin. Wow.
And some of them,
very small margin.
Gonzalo, thank you very much. Bloomberg Business Week. Congratulations on your journalistic work.
On today's week, and we'll see you in about 45 minutes.
We're going to have you in
conversation.
Spanish. Perfect. And meanwhile, we're going to go to a commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to our live Saturday morning broadcast. This is from 8 to 9 in English and from 9 to 10 en Español. As a possible impeachment lure by Donald John Trump, he had yet another shaky week. Let's take a look at what is going on up north.
They're the do-nothing Democrats. They don't do any work. All they want to do is try and win the election in 2020. So they come up with this impeachment nonsense, and everyone knows. The conversation, all based on one phone call that I had, where I'm talking to the president of Ukraine.
Donald Trump defended himself for a second consecutive week after that controversial phone call with his Ukrainian counterpart. which then became a whistleblower's complaint and the subject of an impeachment inquiry by House Democrats. But Trump did not miss out the opportunity to discredit the anonymous tipster and Democratic lawmakers leading the impeachment proceedings.
Well, the whistleblower was very inaccurate. Not a thing wrong, unless you heard the Adam Schiff version where he made up my conversation. Nancy Pelosi and Shifty Shift, who should resign in disgrace, by the way, and Jerry Nadler and all of them.
On Wednesday, during a joint news conference with Finland's president, Donald Trump became visibly disturbed when a reporter asked him, "What favor did you ask to the Ukrainian president?"
You ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked.
Did you hear
me?
me?
Did you want?
Did you hear me?
Yes,
Ask
sir.
him a question.
I will. But
I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir. I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country.
A day after, he did want to discuss the matter by suggesting that Ukraine and China should investigate his political rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter, by referring that Hunter was member of the council in several international companies while his father was vice president.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
Moreover, Democrats continue stepping up pressure against Trump's inner circle. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo admitted being involved in Trump's call with Zelensky. Therefore, he and former New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani are expected to meet with congressional committees to deal with Ukraine's issue. ADN 40 News.
So obviously this is one of the most important things that came up this week. Basically, what they're saying is that Mr. Trump extorted the Ukrainian president, who's in a vulnerable position, by withholding aid in exchange for dirt on his political rival, right?
That's son of his political rival.
Hunter
and
Biden.
It's not any kind of aid, it's military aid, and which is very important for Ukraine at this point because they have the Russian troops at their borders.
Sure.
So there's a couple things going on, and I would suggest that we should be paying attention this upcoming week because there's going to be a lot of information.
The process, right?
The process. There's going to be a series of hearings this week in which they're going to be listening to testimony of not only the first whistleblower that we heard that was a CIA agent, from the intelligence community, but apparently there are two other whistleblowers that have suddenly reared their head. Another person that comes from the CIA that's going to be talking about Ukraine, but there apparently is a whistleblower that's coming out from the IRS, or the way the IRS has been handling Donald Trump's income tax documents. Not only Donald Trump and Pence, and Vice President Pence. So the important part of what's going to be happening also this week is we're probably going to be hearing more and more demands, or there is already demands that also Vice President Pence, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, present their, go to Congress, and they need to go testify before Congress because they will be subpoenaed, which is a formal request by Congress to provide testimony. The important part of all of this, Agustín, I think we need to remind our audience that if you lie before Congress, that is a crime.
That's perjury.
That's perjury. You go to jail for that. And there are people in jail from the Nixon administration when those investigations took place. There are people in jail from they're already in jail. Manafort and Cohen, the lawyer, Donald Trump's lawyers are in jail because he lied to Congress. So the important thing about this is that they're going to subpoena these people. They're probably going to try to eventually subpoena the president. The president may not go testify. But at this point, we know that they're starting to block this, block these processes. And now Congress is saying, if you start blocking, not testifying, and supporting this investigation, or not allowing State Department or CIA agents or those whistleblowers to come and testify, we're going to consider that as part of a crime that's being committed, that you are blocking obstruction of justice. Okay. So all of this is happening this week. What eventually is going to happen, Donald Trump will be impeached. That is, there's no doubt about it. What does that mean? That there are
a simple majority.
It's a simple majority in the lower house in which they're going to send in a series of crimes, well, not crimes, but a series of accusations that he may have committed up to the Senate. The impeachment, that's what the impeachment is. Basically, it's the accusation. It is sent up to the Senate, and the Senate acts as a jury that is presided by the Justice of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, who doesn't make decisions. He just helps the process, facilitates the process. And that's where things are getting stuck. At the Senate, they need three-fourths of the vote.
Qualified, a supermajority.
A supermajority, and the Democrats don't have it right now.
Right.
So that's
because,
why
of course, the Senate is still in the Republican hands.
Exactly.
And even if it weren't, it would be very difficult to get to that three-quarters.
It gets hard to get there. Right. The only thing that could potentially happen is that the Republicans are starting to watch the polls, and of course, if this happens, if it is going to go up to the Senate, we have to see when it happens. Is it going to happen in February, in March? Is this going to happen when they're in the summertime where the Republicans can't change? Can you imagine a scenario where they're going through this process in the middle in the election? Not only the election, they're supposed to be, deciding who the Democratic candidate is. Right. What about the Republican? Are they going to stick to Donald Trump, even though he's going through all of this?
And there was also news, independent of Joe Biden's issues with Donald Trump. There was also news within the Democratic field. Right. Of course, we had a heart attack in one of the front runners. That's Bernie Sanders. He had a heart attack the last couple of days. Right. So he's in the hospital. And so at the same time, Biden is being affected by this issue. So it looks like Granny Warren is looking good.
She has been growing, clearly growing in the polls even before this happened. There's still to be seen how much of this is going to affect Biden. I mean, because there is also, if you've noticed from the Democratic contenders, none of them, I mean, they basically come out and defended Biden, or they haven't used this against Biden yet. So we'll have to see. There's going to be a debate in about a week and a half in Ohio. So we have to see how they behave, and whether they're just going to kind of basically not address the issue and protect Biden, especially because it would be helping Donald Trump if they started talking.
And just so people know also, I mean, there have already been investigations with respect to Hunter Biden, and specifically with respect to Vice President Biden at the time, that have exculpated. That is, he has not been found to have done any wrongdoing with respect to these roles that his son played.
Now, what is extraordinary is that Donald Trump's defense is basically, one, I didn't do anything wrong. And not only I did not do anything wrong, I'm being public about it. We don't want corruption in Ukraine, so that's why we want to make sure that they investigate this and give us the information. And that there was no quid pro quo. We never said that we would never give them the military aid, although it seems the transcripts and testimony from various State Department officials would seem to indicate otherwise. But he came out later and said, and by the way, this is not only a problem with Ukraine, China, if you have any information about Biden, or corruption, Biden's son or former Vice President Biden, come and bring it to us.
Because Hunter was a partner at a firm that did business in China.
And so part of the problem here is basically Donald Trump's just he didn't do anything wrong because he's saying it publicly. And when you look
and he's normalizing it,
well, he's normalizing it. And some lawyers are already arguing he already confessed. I mean, he is publicly asking for information from China, and he clearly asked for information when you see the transcript of the conversation with the president of Ukraine. So this may go really fast in the lower house and Congress, and we may be seeing before the end of the year that there will be these articles of impeachment going up to the Senate.
So I think the most important thing to be on the lookout for is this testimony in front of Congress, and that's something that's going to happen this week.
So we'll be talking about it next weekend.
We're going to be talking about it. So, meanwhile, Apple, you remember Apple, its co-founder Steve Wozniak has been in Mexico for several times. He changed the world when we co-created with Steve Jobs the personal computer. He believes that the future of technology relies on innovation. Let's take a look.
The inventor of the personal computer and co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak, spoke in Mexico about how innovation is largely about having a sense of the future, a vision.
But then there's the person who just walks around and likes to have little ideas, sometimes for fun, not for money. An idea pops in their head and they want to have a laboratory. You need a certain type of skills. I want to run in and try out and see if it works. That's the difference between an engineer and an inventor. And the inventor is the one that gets known for innovation and for being creative, and it's in your personality.
Steve Wozniak shared the path he had to take to finally deliver the personal computer to the world.
The Homebrew Computer Club just made me feel like there were other people in the world, maybe 250 of us would meet every other Wednesday, and a bunch of other people in the world that wanted their own computer like I did and thought it was going to be important, and I had the skills to make it the right way, to find the formula largely that was inexpensive. So I'm very glad. Thank you.
In Steve Wozniak's mind, artificial intelligence will never be able to overcome the human brain.
So how are we going to build a brain out of technology? I was at a company a few years ago, and the engineers there did figure out how to build a brain. It takes 9 months.
The creator of the personal computer and former partner of Steve Jobs revealed that his goal was always to innovate in order to help mankind.
I basically wound up giving it away through philanthropy when I was very young. I didn't say I'm going to build my wealth and turn it into more, because that's when you get corrupted. Your values get corrupted. If you want to make your wealth and your power stronger and stronger over time. I said, no, I just want to have a nice, normal middle life. And I got rid of the huge wealth, I really did. And I support my family right now by speaking.
Hugo Vela, ADN 40 News.
Welcome back to ADN 40 News. The Women's Economic Forum in Latin America will take place next week. Here's a glimpse of what this event is all about.
The Women Economic Forum will take place on October 15th in Mexico City. Our country will host for the first time different personalities in politics and business, entrepreneurs and artists. This year's motto for the forum will be Dreams in Action, connecting the human force. The goal is to analyze gender equality from different perspectives such as education and business. Moreover, the plan is to overcome the salary gap among men and women. Currently, women earn 30% less than men performing the same job. Data suggests that it will take 100 years to achieve gender equality in the workforce. The wife of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Beatriz Gutiérrez Müller, the Secretary of the Interior, Olga Sánchez Cordero, actress Yalitza Aparicio, and filmmaker Alfonso Cuarón will be among the participants. ADN 40 News.
And to talk about this event, we welcome to the studio Michelle Ferrari. She is the chair of the Women Economic Forum Mexico. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning to both of you.
It's good to have you on the show. You know what's interesting about these forums is, there's not, you talk about social issues, but more importantly, you talk about economic issues. I mean, there's kind of these links between the social issues that affect women and economic issues that affect women.
Correct. Yeah, I think that the way you're putting it is absolutely right. It's a platform that tries to promote the economy between women and all the networking that can happen there. Mm-hmm. It's also a forum that is bringing different perspectives around the theme of diversity and inclusion, which is so important these days to keep on generating these awareness throughout these different forums around the world. It's the first time it's coming to Mexico, so it's interesting. It's the 30th edition of it globally.
30 years this has happened?
Yeah. It's the 30th edition. They have it in different countries, so not necessarily 30 years, although this did start around 1975 with an effort with the UN. So it's very interesting to bring it to Mexico. I think there's a lot to still be.
And is it open to the public, or is it an elite thing? Is it do you pay for it? How does it work?
Normally you do pay for it. We're obviously having different sorts of audiences there, students, many people that are coming from the supporters and sponsors that are helping us out for this first year. So it looks like it's going to be an audience of around 1,000 people in a very diverse audience. And we're having
Where
more
is this
than
taking place?
Banco, it's Citibanamex.
Oh yeah, that's a great place to have.
It is, it's a nice convention center. So 15th, 16th, 17th of October, we're having more than 180 speakers there and panels, different formats of people to try to understand different kinds of contents. So it's looking very good. We're very excited.
Let me ask you this. What are the big issues that you have identified for this forum that you're hoping that the speakers will address?
So we're having very different sorts of topics there. Anything from health, things that obviously have to do with gender equality, everything that has to do with corporate life for women, as well as how they're growing in companies, how they're being respected, how they're being promoted into higher places between their peers.
And what are the major issues? I mean, what, are women coming to you and saying, this is what I'm facing, could you please deal with that? Or how does that work?
I think that the statistics and the gaps that we're constantly finding in everywhere that we investigate is very obvious that women are still very much behind. And I mean, salary-wise, 30% at least, I would say, from our...
There's still a 30% salary gap that is for the same job. A man is making 30% more than a woman.
Yep. Totally, and you know, things like financial inclusion for women as well, and how would the world look like if really women were included proactively, right? So I think we're trying to push still things like this for people to understand how we can really action. You know, there's a lot of talk about these things, so maybe we can hear best practices around different perspectives. So it's something that's educational as well. I think a lot of this comes from home, from how parents are educating. So I think it's an awareness in every angle that you want to look at it, political, sports-wise, artists.
What's interesting about these forums, because I've seen this debate in other forums, is how do you get the message out when probably most of the people in this audience, you're preaching to the crowd. I mean, obviously they believe that women should be paid the same. Obviously they believe that women should have equal rights. Obviously they believe that women should be treated the same in the workforce. So what are we learning in terms of, you know, not only speaking among us, but trying to get those who make decisions change?
Well, that's exactly where the issue is. Those that make decisions are probably Caucasian men from 45 to 60 years old, 65. So their beliefs are very, you know, particular. There's a lot of history behind this. So the shift is not that easy, you know. I really think it's something that's going to take, statistics say, at least 100 years for equal gender.
Gosh, really?
And a little more than 200 for equal salary. I mean, these are all
human beings aren't going to be around,
because of our history, you know.
But at the same time, I mean, there have been huge strides. Anybody who's watched Mad Men and all of these period pieces of how women were treated in the workplace just a generation or two ago, it's radically different from what happens today.
It is, but you know, Agustín, in real life, I have a lot of experience with companies. You know, I worked with Great Place to Work for a long time, our global company, but it's hard to see the real statistics going on around these things. I think new generations are going to be less tolerant. So I think companies are going to have to make a shift in order to, you know, have these talents coming in that are going to not support not fair workforce.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
it boils down to that, really.
Using the example of Mad Men, you know, that series that cable that was broadcasted on cable. I mean, at least they were open about how they discriminated women. Now, I think much of the discrimination is not that open, and it makes it even harder to attack. You know what I mean?
It is. It is harder, and you know, just the way they handle it inside companies is still very behind. I mean, you do have companies that are doing a great job of it.
I think that there are a lot of companies that are doing
I have to say here, I have to make a plug for Azteca. Azteca actually, and I have to say that, Azteca actually has a gender unit that was created by Benjamin Salinas, and I know he's been supporting it in a very important way.
In our forum as well.
He's going to be speaking in the forum. And I know that one of the issues that I know they want to talk about is that the need to create these units that in one way or the other, give women the ability to go speak out, if they feel that something wrong is happening in the workforce.
And not be reprimanded for it.
Be reprimanded.
We're going to be picking this up in Spanish, but our time is over.
Thank
and
you,
this
Agustín.
particular table, in a few minutes, we're going to be continuing this conversation. And
Thank you for having us.
And we'll see you in about half an hour.
In about half an hour.
Wonderful.
So Mexico is betting on increasing financial services to the general population. This year, the Mexican Congress passed the FinTech law, that is the financial technology law, to regulate startup companies that provide financial services through the use of technology, such as mobile phones, via apps, websites, and social networks. Currently, more than 22% of Mexican municipalities don't actually have access to banks or financial services. The goal is to promote and facilitate financial inclusion that will lead to a better quality of life for all Mexicans. I mean, that's at least the idea, right? Because there's this issue in terms of what they call in Spanish bancarización.
Right.
And the more the people are a part of the financial system, the more they have access to credit, the more they have credibility.
And the country can grow more. I mean, it's hard to imagine a country growing if people don't have access to banking service.
Exactly.
So to talk about this, we have here in our studios Clara co-founders Daniel Autrique Echeveste and Stefan Molier Alvarez. Welcome to both of you. We're looking at, you both own a bank. Is that the best way to describe you guys?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with that. The reason why this got on our radar is because we saw that Clara had been being a fintech, had raised the most amount of money for any organization of its type in Mexico. So I think if I may, Daniel, let's just start with you. Perfect. If you could give us the laws, the evolution of the laws, what things are allowed, and why you were able, as a Mexican fintech company, to raise, what was it, $50-60 million?
Yeah, it's a $57 million facility. Well, thank you very much for having us here. So first of all, the government in Mexico has increasingly allowed these models to progress.
Right.
Since banking regulation, the fintech regulation that has gotten a lot of attention recently. And the reality is that financial inclusion is a must now in Mexico.
Urgent. It's an
urgent, and it's a, you can even call it a human right. So 50% of the population in Mexico don't have a bank account.
That is an extraordinary number when you think about it. And I know there has been a lot of steps and strategies and legislation that they've tried to pass in order to make sure that people have more access to banks. But so the solution is now internet, or it's going to be web-based.
What makes this different, Stefan?
Yeah.
Talk to us about the evolution.
And it's precisely Ana Maria's point. I think the solution is technology, right? Because the infrastructure to some extent is there. Smartphone penetration higher than many other countries, developed countries. Technology is there in order to offer these services remote in a secure way. Thus, we believe that through technology is what truly is enabling that change. It hasn't happened for the last 50 years. That percentage has remained pretty stable of people that don't have a bank account. We believe the technology is there, the infrastructure is there, and now we can push the services and start gathering a better foothold into those 50% that don't have a bank account.
Daniel, opening up a bank account, and I've done this several times, I'm a businessman, not just personally, but for a business, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, good God, you have to wait for a whole bunch of things, no? Las apuntes de historia, as the joke goes. So they ask for everything. How is it that now, with something like Clara, you can actually, you can go directly, cut to the chase, and open an account? I don't see how we're going to connect the bureaucracy to the reality of technology and the speed.
Yeah, the reality is that this wouldn't have never happened without the digital revolution. So now people own smartphones, and with a smartphone you can do everything. You can do identity verification, you can do a full compliance. So what you do is now what used to take you 2 hours to get to the bank branch, then 2 hours to open it, and 2 hours to remember who you are after spending so much time.
Right.
Now you can do it in
and
less
a
than
month to wait for it to actually
happen. And then it's like you will ship your card in a couple months. Now you can do it in 5 minutes, and you'll get your card the same day.
But is that happening today?
That's happening today.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys raise money for?
Yes, exactly.
You see, the reason, at least the government argues for these regulations, is that they're trying to avoid fraud and money laundering. laundering.
Yes.
I mean, so how do you avoid these problems when this is, because you do have the threat of the government trying to come in and regulate this. I mean, how are you avoiding these issues?
I mean, it is regulated as it is, and I think the regulation makes a lot of sense, right? In saying you're exposing the ecosystem to a structural risk if you allow people to just open a bunch of random accounts.
Right.
What I think, and sorry that I go back to technology, but it allows us to be a bit more dynamic, because the regulation says if you open a level 1 account that is only going to transact $300 a month, which is a reality for a large chunk of the population, then you only need to tell me this and this in order for me to understand who you are. If you go to a level 4 account that transacts sums that could expose the ecosystem to a structural risk, you need to tell me absolutely everything about you. And I think that's where the incumbents have been a bit rigid because they don't leverage technology. When I say rigid, I mean they open the same account for basically everyone.
Okay.
Regardless of whether you're going to transact $30 or you're going to transact $5 million, right? So I think we leverage technology, make it more dynamic, and it's about making financial services more tailored to what you need.
So it should be cheaper then. I mean, the consumer, your clients would probably be paying less transaction costs.
So actually with us, clients pay nothing.
So what's the business for you guys? I mean, come on, you're bankers. Where's the business?
The reality is that typically banks where banks make money is from merchants. So when a customer pays for something, it's the restaurant or the shopping mall that gets charged. So we take that. We don't have to pay for a tower in Reforma.
Right.
So we save on rent and give it back to the user. So we actually offer cashback and we give them a large chunk of that money. And we're still allowed to pay for a couple employees. We don't have a huge fixed cost.
Do you guys basically, are you a platform like Visa and MasterCard, or?
So our card is supported by MasterCard, yes. We have Alliance, and that's how we're issuing right now.
And take me through the process. Who is your typical target audience? Who's your typical client?
Our typical client is a person that has a smartphone that is between 18 and 70 years old, who currently doesn't get a good service from their bank or has other needs that are currently not being met.
Or they don't even have an account.
Or don't even have a bank account. So the reality is, I mean, what Uber did for taxis is what we're trying to do for banks. So who is an Uber customer? It started with a millennial population, but the reality is that everyone can be an Uber customer because they're digital.
As long as you have a smartphone, and that, I guess, is the bottom line. That what's making this this change or this transition into banking online you have to have smartphones.
And we were talking a little bit off the air, Daniel, with respect to credit, because that seems to be the big deal. And one of the things that I was shocked to hear is that you're not even using the credit bureau. You're not using the Buró de Crédito to distribute credits. How does that work? I mean, if you don't use the Buró de Crédito, what do you use?
So the Buró de Crédito was designed many years ago, and it had a purpose. You had a list, and it worked well for banks. The reality is that hasn't changed. So Mexico today, only 16% of the population have a credit card. In Brazil, you have 40%. Argentina is 40%. So we're trying to close that gap. If we were to only use the bureau as the incumbents do, then we would give credit to the same people that call you every day offering you yet another card. The reality is that what we do is we look at people with a different angle and we give them the opportunity to apply. So we look at them, we look at their behavior, we look at how much they make, we look at how they spend. And through that lens, we're able to detect those buckets that have been overlooked by banks traditionally.
This is so.
Daniel Otric Echeveste, thank you very much. Stefan, thank you very much. Congratulations. Lots of luck.
We're going to continue this conversation in a little while in Espanol.
That's right. Perfect. So, for now, because we're coming to the end of our program, we now have the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh is going to talk to us about show business. What have you got, Gabriel Hernandez? Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me this morning. You know, Jose, an acclaimed and widely loved Mexican crooner who shot to fame almost 50 years ago, passed away last Saturday in Miami, Florida. He was 71 years old. A way to say goodbye to the Prince was a massive karaoke at Alameda Central in downtown Mexico City. Dozens and hundreds of fans gathered in this urban park to sing his famous theme songs. Let's watch.
Que tengo 40 y tú 20. Que yo soy todo en mi vida y tú eres tú, sé tu manera, no saben que puedo esperarlo.
And in other news, Tom Cruise visited Kiev, capital of Ukraine. He's scouting new locations for his next films, and this is the story. Let's watch. A Hollywood star stole the show earlier this week as Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko guided him through the parks of the Ukrainian capital.
We feel the energy, very guest-friendly people, very lovely people live in the city. So great energy and a lot of good places where you really enjoy emotionally the city.
Tom Cruise is considering Ukraine as a venue for shooting one of his next films. The Ukrainian Presidential Press Service said on Tuesday, October the 1st, as the actor met with President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Always welcome, and I hope the next time I have a little bit more time to do right now the business, a couple of hours, especially for you, relax. And
we're grateful for the time you gave us also. You're very gracious and very helpful, and I really appreciate it. And the people, they are very warm. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And keep my finger crossed. Actually, you decide to shoot in our hometown.
Us too. Thank you. Thank you.
If you're not going to do it,
thank you.
We have an issue. I know where you live. You know where I live.
A street band welcomed Cruise with a Mission Impossible theme song performed on a traditional Ukrainian instrument. Gabriel Hernández, ADN 40 News.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me this morning.
That was awesome.
You know, it's incredible how Tom Cruise and I look alike.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. So did Tom Cruise demand that they investigate the Bidens in exchange for filming the next film in Ukraine?
I mean, you know, the president of Ukraine was so excited.
Oh yeah, well he's an actor. I mean, the president of the Ukraine is actually coming from a television show where he played the president. So he must have been super excited.
It was absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
And I'm sure the president, thank you, Faraon, thank you. And I'm sure the president of Ukraine would like to be remembered about meeting Tom Cruise and not the conversations with Donald Trump.
These issues with Donald John Trump, of course. No, that's. I mean, it's a great franchise. Obviously, lots of things are going on in the entertainment industry, and well, you know, these guys have filmed around the world. So
and this helps these countries. Like I said, I'm sure the president of Ukraine wants to be remembered to have met Tom Cruise and not because he was supposed to provide information about Biden and talking about. I mean, all this that is happening this week is eventually going to end up in a movie. I mean, it's just the whole thing is just so insane. I couldn't have imagined even writing a script where you would have the president of the United States asking the Chinese and asking the Ukrainians to provide information against candidates that may be.
It's really crazy stuff, and it looks like it's right out of Hollywood. Of course, it isn't. This is real life, or at least it is in this universe. We are going to be going to a commercial break, but when we come back, just like every Saturday from 8 to 9 in English, de 9 a 10 en español. Cuando regresemos después de este corte comercial, vamos a estar en nuestra transmisión en español hasta las 10 de la mañana. No se vaya.
No se vaya, los esperamos.